Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm Gavin.
Might lower my chair. Just trying to get in line. Here we go. There we go. I'll go a bit lower. There. I'm Mark's height now. Gavin, quite rightly, is above us both.
Well, I was actually trying to adjust my lid in order to have symmetry with you on the ground. But anyway, obviously there's no point in trying to make things better. One makes them worse. Like a slump a bit.
Can you hear me? Someone's saying sound.
I can hear you.
So Lindsay Lou, can you type into the comments, hello and welcome everybody. Let's just get ourselves sorted. This is our weekly live. Can you hear me? Lindsay Lou, type in the comments. So,
can anybody hear us?
Dodgy. It's dodgy.
Dodgy.
Okay, let me just try something and I'd like you to tell me if it's better.
Is Mark monitoring us on YouTube, and can he tell us whether we're dodgy?
Better. Lindsay Lou, is this better?
Oh, that's very raw, Katherine.
Much louder. That's much louder. It's fine on YouTube.
Just be a Lindsay Lou. It's fine? Okay. Well, hello. Just don't mind us as we get ourselves organised. Hello and welcome. If you haven't yet, please visit catholicunscripted.com and pick up a monthly or a discounted annual subscription. Not only is it a way for you to support us, to support our work, to ensure that we can keep doing it, really. We rely solely on your support, but it also gives you ad-free videos. Some of you, I know, are frustrated by the ads that you get on YouTube. It will give you all our videos, exclusive videos and interviews, ad-free, and also all our articles, including some fantastic articles that have come out this week, which we will talk to you about in a moment, but not before we say, Mark, where's your hair gone? From Lindsay Lou.
Yeah, no, I've had a bit of a short one for the, yeah. It'll grow back.
Having a holiday haircut. It'll grow back. There we are. We never know, by next week. Well, a few things here. We've had a couple of questions in advance, but before we get to those, and remember, during this live for the next hour, you're with us, do ask your questions and make your comments to join the conversation in the chat. So we'll bring your questions up on screen and answer them. So don't forget, if you've got any questions, to post them and we'll address them. But before they start coming in, we'll catch up with one another and what's been going on in the Catholic world, and also go to some questions that have come in advance. Well, to begin, I'm not in the UK, so I'm in France. France is wonderful, and Mark will be joining my family with his in just over 2 weeks here. And Gavin, you're not at home either in the UK. We're both away, but you're in New York.
I'm in Manhattan, yes.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to get more on that. So Gavin's in Manhattan. Doing exciting things and meeting bigwigs and Catholic. It might all be watch this space for later. I don't know.
Yes, I'm in Manhattan having conversations about a one-day conference that might take place here in the autumn. It's nobody. I mean, the conversations are to see if it can be made to happen. I'm staying in the most extraordinary church called the Church of Saint Jean Baptiste. It's run by some French Canadian priests, and it's just the biggest and most amazing thing you've seen. I mean, it's about 3/4 of the size of St. Paul. It's on Upper East Side Manhattan. In the basement, there's an opera theatre and several schools. And the presbytery is on 6 floors with about 30 or 40 rooms on each. How many? 20 or 30 on each floor. It's just the biggest and most expensive and most luxurious and most amazing piece of church plant I've ever been anywhere near in my whole life. And I'm suffering from jet lag, which makes me extremely unpleasant. And so here I am.
We've got Gavin's living the high life in Manhattan, but we've also had, it would be rude not to mention Gavin's jacket, which somebody likes. So we're going to come to your questions, but first, Mark, how are you? How is it back in old Blighty?
It's been really rainy. There was a big old storm blew through yesterday, and we kind of missed it here in the southeast. But I think Scotland really struggled. I think they had quite a few problems. So yeah, it's not great. The summer started off well, but typical Brits talking about the weather, I suppose. But
well, I'd like to tell you that the Canadians are upsetting everyone in New York because apparently they've lit some fires. And so at Mass today, the priest ended by saying, the air quality is very bad out there. Take care, all of you. It's the Canadian fires. And everyone shook their heads and looked sorrowful. So this is clearly we're in the middle of some eco-tragedy. I haven't noticed the air quality. I mean, it feels pretty normal to me, but then what will I know? Anyway, there's a real eco-anxiety here today in New York.
Well, let's get to the first piece of news, and somebody's mentioned it here and asked us about this, the Pope. So the Jubilee of Youth in Rome, at a prayer vigil, the Pope Leo was asked questions. He was asked, first of all, so this is for the youth, how can we make true friends and build friendships that last? And the Pope said, how do we build the future? Only in Jesus Christ, who makes our friendship eternal. Yeah, friendship with Christ is not just one help among others. When our friendship reflects the love of Christ, we can be certain that they are authentic. So rooting that friendship in Christ. Secondly, he was asked, our youthful years are marked by big questions, but the uncertainty of our times tempts us to postpone decisions. How can we find the courage to choose and to commit ourselves? And the Pope answers, we do not choose something. That we can. What kind of woman do I want to be? We have been freely chosen. Freely out of love, God has given us life. There is a choice in love. Courage to choose comes from love. The gift of our life is the way to fulfill our vocation. Saint Pope John Paul II said here 25 years ago, it is Jesus you are seeking when you seek happiness. It is he who stirs in you. And then he was asked, how can we meet Christ? And he says, our experience of what is good comes from the goodness of the people along our path. Let us be good and let us bear witness to God's goodness. Adore Christ in the blessed Eucharist. Adore Christ in the Eucharist and in the Blessed Sacrament. Work, study, and say to the Lord, stay with us, Lord, for you are our happiness. The future needs witnesses of hope. You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. I seek you, and even the act of calling upon you is already a meeting within you. So 3 answers there to the youth at the Jubilee of Youth in Rome. What did you make of this? A huge gathering, wasn't it? Really a huge event, Mark.
Yeah, there was over 1 million people there, and it's funny because I didn't really hear anything about it in terms of promotion leading up to it. And then all of a sudden it seemed like Pope Leo was just there and there were millions of people there. And how heartening for us to see that the faith is so alive among the young people, and also the thirst and hunger that they have for Jesus. And I thought the way Pope Leo conducted himself and the celebrations that went on and the words that he said were absolutely fantastic. It really was overjoyed to hear him speaking about Christ, and it's always very Christocentric. There was one particular quote that I really liked that he made, which I think was on the 3rd of August, where he said, we are not made for a life where everything is taken for granted and static, but for an existence that is constantly renewed through the gift of self in love. This is why we continually aspire to something more that no created reality can give us. We feel a deep and burning thirst that no drink in this world can satisfy. Knowing this, let us not deceive our hearts by trying to satisfy them with cheap imitations. Rather, let us listen to them. Let us turn this thirst into a step stool, like children who stand on tiptoe in order to peer through the window of an encounter with God. We will then find ourselves before him who is waiting for us, knocking gently on the window of our soul. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant. It's like a bit of philosophy, bit of church fathers, just really spoke to my heart. And it's so good. so good after these 12 long years in the desert to really feel like there's a man there who really does love Jesus, who's in a relationship with Jesus. I mean, Pope Francis was in a relationship with Jesus, but they were just enemies. So it felt like he was staring him down. So it's really good to have, really good. Everything he said, I think, has been beautiful, isn't it?
Mark, that was terribly funny. That was really, 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 really.
Yeah.
I mean, funny is not the right word. Anyway, it was very, very, very.
You remember, Gavin, when he was there were pictures of Pope Francis in Eucharistic adoration, and he wouldn't ever kneel, would he? And like people saying, oh, he's an old fella, but then he'd kneel down and kiss the shoes of foreign diplomats and all this sort of thing, when he was trying to make.
Yeah.
But like when he was in front of Jesus, he was like looking at him like they were having a row.
Well, it's worth remembering. People often say this, that you say he was in a relationship with Jesus, but it was one of conflict. The devil is in it. The devil knows Scripture inside out. We sometimes think, oh, if the enemy is against Christ, doesn't it? But he knows. That's the thing, how easily it can be perverted, how easily something good can be corrupted. The devil can't create, but just distort and twist and pervert what is good. And so I'm not saying Pope Francis was the devil, by the way, for anyone who wants to write in. I'm just saying it's worth remembering that, yes, there's a relationship with Jesus, but what kind of relationship is it? And of course, by their fruits, you'll know them. So Pope Leo didn't begin his Jubilee of Youth with Hagon Loy, was it? Let's make a mess.
Yeah, let's make a mess.
It was far more reminiscent of Pope John Paul II and Benedict. What did you make of the Pope, Gavin, before we move on to another question?
I think I'd like to go back to Francis just for a moment. I think the things you've both said are very, very apposite. I say provocative. I don't mean to be critical. I love listening to you, the sensible things you both said. I think I now reflect on Francis as being a very deeply troubled man. That he was really struggling. We don't know what it was he was struggling with, but he really was struggling. And the trouble is that those struggles sent out some very, very mixed signals. It was very hard for us to know what and why he was struggling, but we felt the shockwaves of it. And so I think, having said that, one of the things I feel, just as Mark has said, is an enormous relief at the clarity and the love, the coherence of Pope Leo's answers. I mean, obviously, when you hear a question like that, you think, well, how would I answer it? And then when I heard Leo's answer, I went, well, I'm glad it's him and not me. Those are beautiful, wonderful, profound answers, worthy of a first-class Pope. So I think I feel very sorry for poor Francis, and I'm just very glad that the church is out of that agony, really, too. And if a year ago we could have been told that we'd have 1 million youth asking a Pope questions about how to manage the existential difficulties of being a human being, and someone had said he'll say these things, well, we'd have been overjoyed. We'd have been very happy, wouldn't we, if we'd known this was coming.
We had a question that came to us in advance, and we'll come to the comments in a moment. And it was around the devil's attempts to destroy the family. So the destruction of marriage, the destruction of the family. And we see this with the spread and increase in pornography, which one of our, somebody who emailed us said, it began and then it used to be top shelf stuff and you wouldn't have access to it. And now it's everywhere and easily accessible. The LGBT pride stuff, everything is sexualized. We live in this very sexualized culture. The first question is, how low can we go? So are we at the bottom, or do we think it can get worse? And secondly, for someone working in youth services with Catholic youth, what can we do to help young people see how unhealthy this sort of sexualized culture is, and why influencers are not the answer? So I guess it's quite interesting. This person doesn't state Andrew Tate, but I wrote a piece which I'll put up here on our website, but you can find it at the moment on the Catholic Herald website, about Andrew Tate, and he has been appealing to young men, even young Catholic men. And so how is it that we can get them to not look in the wrong places, and also to see how unhealthy this culture of sexualized, go and get yours and sleep with as many women as you can, have as many kids with as many women as you can, culture. So 3 questions. How low can we go? Are we at the bottom? 2, how do we get young people to see how unhealthy it is? And 3, how do we get them to not look at influencers as the answer? Mark, back to you.
Well, I think we could, worryingly, I think we could probably go quite a bit lower, which is, not a great thing. Although I do feel that there's a sense that the present culture is running out of narrative. It's running out of stories. And as a result of that, we've seen this resurgence of young people, especially coming back to the church, coming back to the old stories, if you like, the old, finding resonance in the old truths. And so, but it strikes me that they're doing that without very much help from, the men who are supposed to be shepherds, unfortunately. And please God, with this new papacy now, we'll see a turnaround in that. And there are, a whole generation of young priests coming through who are really inspiring and passionate about the faith. So hopefully they'll guide them in the right direction. But I think that the thing, particularly, I saw a brilliant article in Conservative Woman this week about OnlyFans, which is this terrible site. And you have to think about the culture, the way that this is now, where something, even when we're perhaps, 30 years ago when we were young, it would have been unthought. You just couldn't imagine that that girls would be promoting the fact that you can see them like, in compromising situations on the internet if you pay a certain amount of money. I mean, fundamentally, it's prostitution. But that is something that is now aspirational in our culture. And as long as, it's like this idea that money is the most important thing, and irrespective of how you get it, the easier you get it, then, and it's the idealization of sex. That's what really worries me, and that's the pornographic culture has led to this. If I'm thinking in the sense of the 10 Commandments, that there's a real idolatry going on, and it's this thing you see it in the in the culture with LGBT ideology as well, where it's basically this message that's coming through that puts your sexuality at the center of who and what you are. And until that is clearly demonstrated as being a false narrative, I think we're going to continue to see this decline. And it really is problematic for our culture. What was the second thing? What can we do to help the young people?
Yeah, how do you help them see? Yeah.
Well, I think that the answer to that is, I think it is going on, and it will continue to go on. And it's not really anything we can do other than to keep doing what we're doing, because we know that our culture, we know that Christian culture is way superior to all this other stuff that's going on. And people at the moment might be mocking it or belittling it, but what you do see very clearly is, and I'm seeing it through the generations in my family, where my oldest son is married and they're having babies, and their friends who aren't married and who are, the girls, it looks off, it's free and easy. That's the sort of approach, we can be in a relationship, we can have all the things that marriage would give without any sort of social cost, without any commitment. That's what people seem to be frightened of. But then after a few years of this, it becomes very obvious that what they actually haven't got is any integrity, any dignity, any respect. That the boys are, I'm thinking of direct examples here that, of people that I know where the boys are literally still boys. They're 30 now. They're still playing the Xbox and masturbating. The girls are like, come on, we need to move on with our life and have a family and get married. And the boys are, why would they? Yeah. Why would they change? They, so, and what's happening is people are starting to realize that, committing to a wife being in a relationship that costs you, that's a sacrificial relationship where you need to serve your partner and not say, what am I getting out of this? But instead of that, to be looking for someone that you can give everything to. That is the answer to that, because that's the reality of having children, is that you drill holes in yourself and to give it to your kids. And that you need to have that same spousal relationship with your wife. And that is the same spousal relationship that our priests have with the church. And so this is what really works. And you see the broken kids looking at, like my son, and sort of saying, oh, wow, that's amazing, but that's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been. And it's giving that, showing that this is a better life. I think that will turn things around in the long term. And it's not there's no quick fix to it, I don't think. But you have to be very careful not to sort of say, to give trite answers, because the kids can, recognize hypocrisy and lies very, very easily. And we have to avoid thinking that there's an easy answer. So what was the third question?
And how might we say to young people that influences that looking at influencers online is not necessarily the answer to how you find out solutions?
Well, I mean, it depends. There are good influencers as well as bad influencers, aren't there? So I think that you increasingly hear stories of people who have reached conversion because they've started. I mean, I was watching a video from Joe McLean today, our friend Joe McLean from A Catholic Take, who lives in Texas, and he started doing these walk and talk videos. I don't know if either of you have seen them. We did a brilliant one on Newman today, and he walked it back. He drew parallels with Newman's journey, and I'm sure, Gavin, it really resonates with me that this is an important thing for you. But like he was a Protestant who was sort of at the bottom end of his life. His wife was going to leave him, etc., etc. And he went to the fathers. He heard a sermon at a Protestant church that mentioned the church fathers, and something clicked in his mind, and he thought, I can discover what the truth is by looking at the fathers. And then he just went through this process, and he was drawing a parallel with Newman's journey, and like he said that there was a point where he started listening to Matt Fradd and Trent Horn and Scott Hahn, and we all know these names. These are people who have influenced us in a positive way. So I think we shouldn't worry too much about the fact that kids are going to listen to kids. They're going to listen to the internet or whatever fad there is, TikTok or whatever it is at the moment. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram, by the way, people. But the point is really that you've got to listen to the right voices, haven't you?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. I want to pick up on a couple of things that have come in the comments, which I completely agree with. First of all, in answer to the question about how low we can go, I agree with Mark. We can go much lower than perhaps our minds can even think. And the problem is, once it's out there, then your mind goes there, and it can get far more depraved. As Mark said, when we were growing up, we couldn't have imagined what had happened with the OnlyFans stuff, and especially with women. Somebody made the point that we have it too easy. I think that's absolutely true. We have it too easy, and young people have it too easy, and therefore they're not trained in self-sacrifice. They're not trained in disciplined, which makes it too easy to give in to your base desires. And secondly, someone mentioned consent, that sex education, if it's going to happen in schools, I mean, that's a whole other question whether it should, if that's the right place for it, but let's say it is, shouldn't be focused on consent. There's this view that sex is not sacred, but rather consent is necessary and sufficient. And that's how we teach our young people. Consent is necessary and sufficient. So if that's your baseline and you're teaching that to young people, then they're going away saying, well, as long as she consents to be choked, or as long as she consents to having a threesome or a gangbang, then it's fine. Everyone's agreed. So 3 cheers. And the problem is that doesn't take into account a million other things that need to be considered. So I think it's absolutely right to say we need to move away from this idea of sex as consent-based. The other very important thing I think to mention is, and this was about how do we get used to see that it's unhealthy. I think we need to do a lot of unraveling here, because what I sometimes see is people say, and this is even Catholics, who say, well, I don't think people should be having sex with each other until they're married. Or they sometimes say, I don't think people should be having sex with each other until they're in a stable, committed, loving relationship. But then you ask them about modesty. Oh, but I think women should wear what they want. And I think, what about contraception? Well, they should have the right to contracept. They see them as not coupled. So what I think we need to do more of is to help young people see that if you unravel from, let's say, at one extreme, the extreme pornography and the Bonnie Blue and the OnlyFans, and you unravel it back, you do get to questions about contraception and the sexual revolution and feminism and modesty and how we dress. You can't uncouple all of those. So I don't think it's enough to just say all this stuff on online porn is bad, but we don't have to ask questions about the how we understand women, about what feminism has done, about what the contraceptive pill has done, about how that influences our attitude towards one another. The other thing is that if you really want to, I don't know in what context this person's asking, but if you really want to look at sociological studies, yes, of course, thank Lambeth for that. Yeah, somebody's put in the comments. Yeah, if you want to look at then you will find stuff that says young men in their mid-20s are unable to perform sexually. They can't get an erection. They're basically physically damaged by pornography. They're unable to enter relationships and hold them down. They're unable to become fathers. This is outside of the fact that it is wrong in itself. And sometimes this happens with the abortion discussion. People talk about abortion and say, well, abortion is bad because it's hurtful to women. It can mean that they're being used. It leaves you open to abuse in terms of trafficking and stuff. But at the end of the day, as Catholics, we know it's wrong because it's wrong in itself, because it's the ending of human life. So I would want to say we need to understand why casual sex and an attitude to casual sex and an attitude to women and men and how they understand their relationships is wrong in itself. The kind of secular narrative is wrong in itself. But if you have to, you could also point to the psychological and the sociological studies that say basically you're going down a path that's damaging you. Sorry. So, Gavin, do you want to comment on that and then on to the next question?
No, I think both you and Mark have given really excellent answers, and I can't improve on them.
In which case, I think we should, we've got quite a few questions tonight, so let's bear that in mind as we answer them. We've got half an hour left, so there's quite a few questions coming in. Let's turn to Newman. So we heard this week wonderful news that my school was Cardinal John Henry Newman. Heart speaks to heart. So I'm a fan of Newman anyway. Gavin's a fan of Newman, Mark is, and he's going to be a doctor of the church. Stephen Morgan, our friend Stephen Morgan, wrote a wonderful piece, as did Gavin, on Newman for our site this week. So do take a look at that. Tell us about this, Mark, this news, and how Morgan has been able to explain that Newman is often taken by the progressives to justify their progressive doctrine, and how that's wrong. How Stephen Morgan wrote about why that's wrong.
Well, I think the most egregious example was New Ways Ministry, which is Father James Martin's website, sort of claimed Newman as the first openly homosexual saint when he was canonized, which, is not just another example of the fact that the only thing really that James Martin cares about is homosexuality, and he can paint anything with a homosexual brush. It's not about Catholicism, it's just about same-sex attraction. It just is. I don't know how he's allowed to get away with it, but that basically encapsulates the argument, is that there are definitely two sides within the church under Pope Francis who were arguing to sort of adopt Newman as their patron. And obviously the Orthodox side is the side that knows Newman. who's bothered to read Newman and understand Newman. And the other side is the side that doesn't know Newman and wants to twist what he taught about several issues. Conscience is one of them, but which they mangle. But the biggest one, the one that he's most well known for, perhaps, is this idea of the development of doctrine. And Newman was talking about the development of doctrine in the sense that he was an Anglican, brought up in a Protestant, with a Protestant mindset, that the Catholic Church was a distortion from the original version of Christianity. And he set out to prove this. He was an Oxford scholar. He was, highly respected academic. And he wrote an essay, did years of study to demonstrate the fact that the Catholic Church was in error, and that it had created additions to accretions to the Christian faith. And in order to do this, he did a lot of study into the church fathers, and fundamentally along that journey, at some point, he recognized the fact that the Christian church was the Catholic Church, and that it couldn't be argued any other way, that the church that he saw in the fathers, the church that he saw Justin Martyr talking about the Mass in the 2nd century, this is the Catholic Church. The way that they talked about the Eucharist, that it couldn't be argued any other way. And so, the development of doctrine was the way that he explained that the things that were held in the early church had developed into what we have in the church today, in a beautiful way, in a way that provides us with the fullness of that truth, that helps us to understand those truths. It's not anything other than an increase in our understanding. And so that's basically, because this argument is going on, and if you say, oh no, it's not going on, you've got Tucho Fernandez actually used it to justify Amoris Laetitia, and he used it to justify Fiducia Supplicans. So this is literally in the Vatican going on. So I got in touch with our friend Stephen Morgan, who's the rector of the University of Macau. But he's like an ex-Navy commander. He's an absolutely brilliant guy, and he's great to talk to. We were fortunate enough to have him on one of our retreats. He gave a lecture, which was outstanding as well, brilliant, wasn't it? So at Stonyhurst. So yeah, we all three know him and love him. And when I first contacted him, he was like, "Oh, don't be so ridiculous." And I was like, "Look, this is going on." I don't think he knew that it had been justified in the Vatican. Yeah. And because it's so ridiculous to him, someone who's like the foremost leading Newman scholar in the world today, he was like, "Well, how on earth could you do that?" So anyway, between the backwards and forwards, I managed to convince him into writing a short essay for us on why that's nonsensical. And as Katherine says, you can read it on our website. Please do. It's free. I didn't put because I think it's so important, and it has been read by thousands of people already. And it's been shared by a number of professors. So it obviously resonates with people. And the point really is that it needs to be said. It needs to get out there, because people need to understand that to push this line just makes you look stupid. It's not a proper development, a theological angle you can use. You can't manipulate Newman in this way. And if you do, then those of us who understand even the basics about Newman will be laughing at you because you're an idiot. And yeah. I'll put links to the Amazon. This is Morgan's book, which is absolutely outstanding. Very it's good. Quite academic. He sent, we're three of us are lucky enough to have it, but I'll put links. It's out in paperback on Amazon, so I've put the links in the article as well if you want to learn more about it. But the point really is Newman is extraordinary intellect. Very, very. It's great to track his journey from Anglicanism to Catholicism, and I'm sure Gavin will, tell us even more about that.
Well, let's go to Gavin now and ask, because Gavin, you also wrote a piece about Newman this week. So tell us a bit about that, and then hopefully we'll have time for just another couple of questions.
Yes, I don't think I can improve on Mark's response, really. The point about the development of doctrine was that Newman was writing not for Catholics, but for Anglicans. There is a Protestant propaganda campaign against Catholicism. I'm not sure Catholics understand quite how deep it goes or the shape that it takes, but what Newman was in the middle of a civil war in Anglicanism. There was another group. So in the 1800s, this group who were, I call them the sacramental nostalgics. They knew that something was missing sacramentally, and so they began to pretend to be or to borrow from Catholic tradition. Then the question arose, can this be done authentically within Anglicanism, or do you actually have to become a Roman Catholic? And the reasons for not becoming a Roman Catholic were that the Catholics had invented some very strange teaching. So part of the Reformation propaganda was to say the Immaculate Conception of Mary is holy and proper. You won't find it in the Gospels, and it's a doctrinal imposition. So all the Protestants think that what Catholics have done is to find themselves with corrupt teachings that they've imposed upon the Gospels. They didn't take seriously the promise that Jesus made to the disciples, I have many things to say to you, you can't bear them now. The Holy Spirit will lead you into all truth. And then what that text does is it throws out the question is, how long will the Holy Spirit lead you into all truth? Up until the 3rd century, up until the 5th Ecumenical Council. I mean, unless you, this is a bit like when does life begin in conception? If you don't have an answer, then you need to assume that the face value answer is the right one. The face value answer is the Holy Spirit will always go on leading the church into all truth. So this was essentially a way of trying to help Protestants understand that they had been propagandized and to give them a sense of what the Holy Spirit was up to. To my mind, it's so self-evidently true. As Mark quite rightly said, you only have to read the Fathers to see this line of continuous development. You do have to read the Reformation arguments and to see through them. But this is partly what I mean by saying that when I became a Catholic, I had to reread history. I had to reread the 16th century and free myself from the propagandization. The paradox is that what Newman was doing was to expose the deficiencies of the Protestant critique of Christianity. And the reason why the question that Mark addressed has arisen is because within the Catholic Church, Protestantism has found its way back in again, in the sense that there are a group of people who are trying to change what the Catholic Church is into a new religion. This is the progressives that Tuccio Fernandez represents. So of course, what they did was they'd taken this motif, I suppose you might call it, of Newman, because they liked the sound of the words, detaching it completely from the context in which he wrote it and the understanding. And then they're using it in a very superficial way to justify the heresy that they're trying to slip into the Catholic Church. The very good news is that with Pope Leo, it's almost certain that this attempt will simply be stopped in its tracks. And to be Catholic is to be Catholic, and to accept the fact that the dogmatic developments and doctrinal ones that we've had are wholly consistent with what we find in Scripture. So it's just that most people don't understand them. So Newman really is he's assigned to Protestants. It's lovely that the Catholics have said, well, we're very pleased to have him, and he's a clever man, and we like his spirituality and his prayers, we love his hymns and his poetry. But I think his real impact ought to be on Anglicans. And what I would like is that if any Anglicans would read him and understand and give up the alternative view set out by Pusey, that you can actually have Catholic spirituality within a Protestant context, which is just a piece of nonsense. But there are plenty of people like our good friend who went over to be an Anglican minister in America who keep on saying this and have clearly never read Newman nor understood him. So it's very helpful that we have an essay explaining what the development of doctrine was intended to achieve and why.
I think one of the important things as well, Gavin, was, I don't know if you saw it, but on the article, I managed to go back to 2023 and find a speech by Stephen Cottrell, who is the man who's pretending to be the Archbishop of York. who is from the town where I live, and is a complete muppet of the highest caliber. And somehow he was allowed to go into the General Synod in the Church of England and argue that same-sex marriage was permissible because of Newman's development of doctrine. So I managed to embed that in the essay if you want to go and watch that. But it's astounding and a really useful example of the misuse of Newman in this way. So
I think one of the things,
stand for it.
You're right. I mean, one of the things I hope that we can contribute on a channel like this is that there's a degree of theological integrity in information where you tell the truth about what's happened in church history. And I hope that we can provide what that is, because as you say, it's almost beyond belief that a hierarch in the Church of England could talk such terrible nonsense. But it can only happen because people haven't read Newman, they haven't read the fathers. We're dealing with people who are theologically and historically really ignorant and quite prejudiced. And I don't mean to say that to suggest that we're superior, but we are informed. And between the three of us, we're comparatively well informed. And one of the things we're trying to do is to compare the information. I mean, if I can be frank for a moment, I'm sorry to be rude, but Calvin Robinson has been writing recently on the superiority of the Pusey position against Newman. And I've kept on saying, as he's put his views in the public space, you haven't read the history. You're completely unfamiliar. I mean, can I give you an example? So I've been reading Scarisbrooke on Henry VIII again recently. Scarisbrooke is a wonderful Catholic theologian, but he's about 90. And his book on Henry VIII is masterful. There are really two English theologians who set out to confront the propaganda. They're Eamon Duffy and Scarisbrooke. One thing Scarisbrooke says is that Henry VIII wasn't any kind of Catholic. He was an autocratic, power-broking egotist whose Catholic devotion and understanding was no more than skin deep. And then he explains why, in terms of what he did and how he behaved and so on. But what we have with people who follow the Pusey rule is that that they say that this man, who they then say, well, he started the Church of England, was a profound and sincere Catholic, and that profound and sincere Catholicity has informed the Church of England to this day. This is so preposterously historically untrue that it's awful that people can say it. But if you haven't read any of the stuff in the 16th century, if you haven't read Scarisbrooke on Henry VIII, if you haven't read St. Thomas More, if you haven't read the Anglican Articles, if you haven't read the way in which the Elizabeth set out to kill and destroy and humiliate and execute the priests who brought in the Mass, because the Anglican mindset was utterly antipathetic to the Catholic, then you'll buy all this rubbish. And unfortunately, we have influences, I mean, ignorant influences like Calvin, who's done 6 terms of mixed theology of one kind and another. I dare say he's read a few other books, but putting out disinformation of the worst kind. And it's very embarrassing, because then it looks like it's sour grapes when we say, look, you're really silly and ignorant, and you're talking, far beyond your competence. But actually, if we don't say that, then unfortunately we leave the ground clear for people who are providing disinformation in order to sustain the fantasy of their own comfortable position. It's not very nice to do, but if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So we have to do it.
Yeah, so there are some good influences, and we are one of them, 3 of them. So stick with Catholic Unscripted. We have a few, maybe let's call them quicker fire questions, perhaps. Sandra's asking about Phoebe. This has come up a number of times. September, there's a big push to honour St. Phoebe. Please clarify, was she indeed a deaconess in the early church? So it's really a question getting at the women deacons issue that we see coming up in Synod and so on. Mark, I'll go to you for your answer. Was Phoebe a deaconess in the church? Come on, Mark. You got 5 seconds.
No, she wasn't. Well, if she was, it was a different kind of diaconate than the one that we've got today. So it's a kind of historical revisionism. And it's just not anything that we've got a 3-fold ordination, and it's a closed question. Why are we worried about it?
Yeah, Mark, Gavin, anything to add about Phoebe?
Yes, yes. If you ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer. And the wrong question that's being asked about Phoebe, as Mark says, is intended to justify the ordination of women to the diaconate, which will then act as a platform to ordination of priesthood. So why would you even consider the ordination of women to the priesthood? And this is the way to get there. If you understood that the sex of Jesus was important, the sex of Jesus was important, the sex of his mother was important, the language that Jesus used about the Father was important. Only by subverting these important things and not asking the questions about why did Jesus use that language. There's a very good book that suggests, for example, that given that you have men and women, if God wanted to become incarnate, he could only become incarnate as a man because he had to be born of a woman. If God came as a female Messiah, you'd have a female Messiah born of a female mother, initiated by something up there we don't know about. There would be no balance at all. The fact is, we have a balance between the sexes in the theological narrative we have, and these attempts to change it to the ordination of women are in fact the fruit of feminist philosophy, which is anti-man. It's actually anti-God the Father. One of the problems about feminists is they've made it very difficult to be reconciled to God because they don't like fathers, they don't like men, they're depriving people of the image of good fatherhood. So how can you be reconciled to God and call him Abba, your father, if you're being driven by a philosophy that says fatherhood is evil, wrong, and we better make it all a feminine model? So this is all presumed by the question, was Phoebe a deaconess? You're starting in the wrong place, you're going to get the wrong answer. Why not accept the theological categories the church has given you that are steeped in the New Testament and try and understand what they mean? Like Chesterton said, don't knock a fence down if you don't know why it was built there in the first place.
Yeah, and you can't really understand unless you grapple with a true understanding of femininity and masculinity, and understand that the church is feminine and that the priest in persona Christi has to be masculine. And you can read Mulieris Dignitatum. Pope John Paul II speaks about this and writes very clearly why the priest must be male, understanding a male-only priesthood and its significance, going right through Scripture, but also one can see it in terms of like our understanding of ourselves and creation. The masculine gives from without and the feminine receives within. Well, we are not God. We receive creation from God. And so the church is always feminine. Christ is always masculine. Christ still has a male body today. I don't know what to tell you, except we don't know how it was asked, this question, by the way. It wasn't asked with obvious support for the women, the female diaconate. It was just saying, what do we think? Was Phoebe a deacon? But yes, there's a male-only priesthood for reasons that are too deep to get into in this next 10 minutes. But one does have to understand true femininity and true masculinity. A question about the Latin Mass. I've lost it now, but it really is tapping into the whole Traditionis Custodes and Summorum Pontificum, which again, we have covered a number of times, but if briefly we could just maybe give an answer to Joyce. Why is the Latin Mass such a problem? Why can't it just be said? If the priest wants to and the people want it, why can't they just say it?
You're right, Joyce. It's not a question, that's a statement of fact.
Exactly, yeah, that's how it should be.
Because Pope Francis was a politician, and who was at war with political factions or whatever, and he wanted to smack some people around. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, good. Okay. By the way, Michael says I'm reading Reformations. I think we talked about Carlos Ayer's Reformations, thanks to your reference some weeks back. So that's good to hear. If you come in weekly and you want to report back on how you're finding some of the recommendations from either us or others in the comments, then do so. And if you haven't joined our Substack, our website, visit catholicunscripted.com. And there is also a chat facility there where members can talk to one another and build a bit of an online community, as well as all the content, the videos and the articles. Some people saying the church you're at, Gavin, that you spoke about at the beginning is beautiful and they know it well. And let's bring this up. It's Martin Bennett. It's Martin Bennett again, our biggest fan. Interesting how you can be so certain about the motives of all the people who have different interpretations of Catholicism. A few of your interpretations might even be right. The level of rudeness is rather immature.
Oh, you
rude.
haven't even begun to see me be rude. You think this is rude? My word, you've no idea. I think there's a difference between rudeness and critique. The trouble is, the more stupid an idea is, the more ruthless the critique is. I think what you're experiencing is excoriating critique of some very stupid ideas. I don't think it's rude. I think it's clarity you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I don't think you can say that, you know, attacking Stephen Cottrell for being completely wrong is rude. It's not rude. It's just fact, or whatever it is. I don't know what you.
But we do live in an age where But we do live in an age, and that's part of the problem, where we are concerned about rudeness at the cost of truth. And if we look at the lives of the saints, somebody else made a comment in here, which again I've lost, which we could flash up, saying until we rediscover the lives of the saints, we're lost. You know, we or in part at least, something like that, because we forget that actually there's a difference between being rude with a motivation to hurt others and to be truthful and to speak in love and truth and not obfuscate, because there's too much obfuscation, isn't there? And it leads people to hell. I mean, we're talking about people's eternal souls. If we have priests and bishops preaching something that doesn't help people to convert, to repent and convert, then they are leaving them open to an eternity without Christ. How can that be loving at the cost of being nice and saying it sweetly? Tough. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And as for the lukewarm, well, we know what happens then. So
we're offering a critique of the nice. We're faced with the religion of the nice, and we repudiate it. Let me offer you a frank explanation of the difference between what's rude and what isn't rude. You see, something is rude when people offer criticism without example, without explanation. What you've had from us today, every single time, is criticism linked with explanation. Now, if we hadn't explained why we thought it was wrong, or why we thought it was lacking, or why in the context we thought it was misleading, we might be understood as being rude. It suggests you haven't listened to the conversation and you haven't joined the dots between the analysis and the examples we gave. And so because it's not nice, you've mistaken it as rude. And I suggest you think again, you reassess what the difference between rudeness and critique is, and you notice that we're offering critique. Now, if you don't like our critique, tell us where we've misled you in the difference between the analysis and the examples. And then we'll certainly give reconsideration to our analysis. But until you do that, you're the one being rude, because you're offering insult without examples. And frankly, stop it.
Yeah.
But I think that what we're doing is we're talking about, like, we are proponents of a faith that is based on objective truth. Our Lord said, "You will know the truth and it will set you free." And what we're doing is we are talking about what the church teaches. That's what we're interested in, and that's what we're trying to share with people. And that's not a matter of opinion. That's not subjective. It's objective in nature. So, you know, that's it. Tough. We're going to defend the faith.
You'll find Anglican unscripted. You'll find Anglican unscripted very nice and not very. Try it out. You may prefer it there.
We've had one more comment from Martin saying you can't lump all feminists together. Well, I'm sorry, I'm with Alice von Hildebrand on that. That feminism is a great win for men. She says it's a problem. I agree with her, because why do you need a label? Why do you even need it? Yes, I understand there's different waves, but why do you need a label? We're Christian. We're Christ-centered. We understand women and man, male and female, through our faith. It's theological. We don't need to layer on a cultural addition. By the way, anyway, somebody thinks Martin Bennett's my husband and says, "Get your man in order." He's not. He might be my brother-in-law, because I do have a Martin Bennett brother-in-law, but he hasn't told me he's sneaking into Catholic Unscripted to question us. But he's not my husband.
We're not
as amusing as that is.
We're not lumping all feminists together. Feminism is an immensely complex structure. Feminism is an immensely complex structure with a number of different waves and constituents, but it's based upon certain presuppositions. And what we're examining is the presuppositions that feminism is based on, which then develops into an enormous structure. So it's not the people we're lumping together, it's the thought process we're trying to explain to you, and why it causes such difficulty to all the people who adopt it.
Yes, absolutely. There you go. And Joseph saying, telling the objective truth is an act of charity. Absolutely, it is, Joseph.
Yeah, very good. Good. So, and it was St. John Vianney's feast day yesterday, I think it was. I just went through Ars, which is the home of St. John Vianney, the Curé d'Ars, Ars-sur-Marne, where he famously bumped into a little shepherd boy.
Madame Benny, formidable,
incroyable. And he,
très bon, très bon.
Stop bullying me. Stop it, in the name of feminism. And he said to this little shepherd boy, show me the way to Ars and I'll show you the way to heaven. And he is, of course, patron saint of all parish priests, and wonderful saint. We wrote about him. There's 2 articles about him on our website this week, so do check those out. I know that, by the way, we know that some of the questions you're asking us are very deep, and we simply can't answer them adequately in 5-10 minutes, or even if we spent the whole hour on these questions about female priests, questions about, well, we could, then we're never going to have any. There you go. But as for the reasons, so do look to our articles. It's often in our articles that we're able to write more extensively on these issues, and Mark's pointed to some great ones on John Henry Newman this week. Well, no, I did not dance La Franglais, by the way. I know St. John Vianney famously said, if there's any more dancing in Ars, he's not going to give absolution. Sorry, go on.
Well, I just wanted to promote this one that Gavin wrote this week that literally had me roaring with laughter. It's absolutely brilliant. And it's about the, well, I think we talked about in our live last week, the Anglican prelate who came down to tell off the people who'd booked the hall to do a choir practice or something, and he came down in his dressing gown to tell them off.
I'd like to add a bit of background, because not everyone will know this, but I mean, I was originally asked to write this for the Catholic Herald. And when I did, I got an emergency phone call from somebody within the institution saying, you're forbidden to tell the world that this man is a Freemason and has been divorced. I said, I'm forbidden, am I? The answer was, yes, you're forbidden. Okay, so I then had to decide whether I would not write the article at all, or whether I'd try and confront this forbiddenness with something else. So basically, I took the piss and tried to explain the incompetence and the shallowness of this man who was a Freemason, give it up, and anecdotally has gone straight back to it. And although I didn't say anything about his divorce, I did say something. Most people thought the reason he'd made such a dreadful, who know him, was because he'd been sent down by his second wife to tell them off, and appeared therefore dishevelled and slipperless because the missus upstairs was bullying him to do it. So we didn't want to be unnecessarily rude, but I wasn't going to be censored. And I thought there are other ways of telling the truth about this ridiculous situation, even if I wasn't allowed to mention the fact that he was a committed and senior Freemason, and consequently didn't really have much claim to being the moral platform he was occupying.
Mm. Yeah.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. Well, we're just touching. Actually, I'm in France, so my timing's wrong. In the UK, it's nearly 8:30, right? It's almost 9:30 here.
Yeah.
Which means we just. Yeah, and you're somewhere completely different. So, we are finishing up now. We will write about some of the things that you've asked us to write about and answer your questions. And we're back every week, remember. Please God, hopefully all 3 of us, Tuesdays, 7:30 to 8:30 UK time. And you'll find us here next week, all being well. Until then, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your comments. We know somebody's just drawn attention to the crisis in the Middle East again, and we continue to pray for
not another crisis
the Palestinians. We continue to pray for the Palestinians. But I know there's been some terrible footage coming out of Palestine, and the especially devastating to see the children who we can see are being starved. So let's continue to pray for them. Pray for one another, and ask you to pray for us too. Thank you. Right. Any last words? Mark, Gavin?
No, thank you for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really helps us.
Yes.
Until next week, God bless.